The envelope was cream-colored, thick with embossed edges. Eleanor Bennet stared at it on her doormat for a full minute before picking it up. No one ever sent her letters anymore, and certainly not from Castle Combe. Her name was handwritten in ink she recognized instantly, her mother's. But her mother had passed away 3 months ago. Inside, the letter was simple. A reunion. One final gathering of the Bennet family at the old estate. Her mother had arranged it before she died, requesting Eleanor's presence. Eleanor folded the letter and leaned against the hallway wall. She looked down at the tiny trainers beside the coat rack. Jamie, 7 years old, her entire world, was humming to himself in the next room, drawing on the back of an empty cereal box. He had never met most of the Bennet family. And Eleanor wasn't sure he should. They had judged her the moment she'd chosen art over university, and dismissed her completely when she became a mother at 21. Her cousins were barristers, doctors, architects. Eleanor was a street muralist. Her paintings colored underpasses in Bristol, but her family had only seen disgrace. Still, she could hear her mother's voice in the words of that letter. Give them a chance. Give Jamie a chance to know where he came from. A week later, Eleanor and Jamie stepped off the bus in Castle Combe. The air was cooler than in Bristol, with that damp earth smell only old villages had. Stone cottages lined the narrow streets, windows brimming with flower boxes and lace curtains. She hadn't been back in 15 years. Nothing had changed. That was the problem. At the Bennet estate, a grand ivy-covered manor that loomed behind wrought iron gates, Eleanor hesitated. Jamie, clutching his sketchpad, whispered, "Is this where you grew up?" She nodded. "It is." A butler, unfamiliar and too stiff, opened the door. "Miss Bennet. We've been expecting you." Inside, laughter echoed down the hall. Eleanor recognized the voices before she saw the faces. Her Aunt Marianne's sharp tone, Cousin Frederick's booming laugh, and the delicate tinkle of cutlery on fine china. The drawing room looked like it belonged in another century. Crystal decanters, velvet upholstery, oil paintings of long-dead Bennets. And in the middle of it all, family members turned to stare as Eleanor entered. Marianne rose first, her lips already pursed. "Eleanor, I hardly recognized you. You've changed." The room buzzed with thinly veiled discomfort. Then Frederick smirked. "And this must be the boy." Jamie stepped behind his mother's coat. "Come out and say hello," Eleanor said gently. Jamie obeyed, clutching her hand. A few murmurs followed. Someone whispered, "Just like his father." Eleanor's jaw tightened. She'd braced herself for this. But Jamie hadn't. Still he said nothing. Just stared back at them all with quiet curiosity. That night, Eleanor lay awake in her childhood room, listening to the rain drum the windowpane. Jamie slept beside her, his small body curled like a question mark. She traced the cracks in the ceiling, old memories pressing in. She should never have come back. But then again, she wasn't alone anymore. Jamie was with her. And for him she would stay. For now. The next morning, Eleanor awoke to the quiet clink of china from downstairs. Jamie was already up, sketchpad in hand, his brow furrowed in concentration. She dressed quickly, pulling on a plain jumper and jeans. The reunion was scheduled for midday, and Eleanor knew the storm was only just beginning. In the dining room, the Bennet family sat around a long oak table polished to a shine. Eleanor counted nearly 20 faces, some familiar from childhood photographs, others new and stern. Marianne gave a thin smile, her eyes sharp as she regarded Eleanor's worn coat and untidy hair. "Glad you could make it," she said. "Though it's a surprise you didn't bring your usual entourage." Eleanor bit back a retort. She wasn't here to argue. Frederick raised his glass, loudly clearing his throat. "To the prodigal daughter's unexpected return." Laughter rippled around the table, cold and pointed. Jamie sat close, clutching his mother's hand. Eleanor caught his eye and nodded reassuringly. Dinner was a parade of subtle barbs disguised as small talk. Comments about Eleanor's past, her unstable lifestyle, and her questionable choices floated across the polished tablecloth like poison. Yet Eleanor held her ground. Every insult was met with calm silence, or a quiet correction. Jamie remained quiet too, observing. Suddenly, Marianne leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Do you really think you belong here, Eleanor? After all these years away?" A hush fell over the room. Eleanor's throat tightened. I'm here because my mother wanted me here. And what about Jamie? Marianne's voice sharpened. Will he fit in with the Bennett legacy? Jamie looked up at his mother, then at the family. His small fingers tightened on his sketchpad. Eleanor's heart ached for him. That evening, Eleanor found Jamie in the garden, sitting beneath a large oak tree. He looked up as she approached. I don't like them, he said softly. I know, love. But why do they act like I'm not real? Eleanor swallowed hard. Sometimes people are scared of what they don't understand. Jamie nodded, eyes serious. Maybe one day, I'll say something that makes them listen. Eleanor smiled, though her heart was heavy. She hoped he wouldn't have to wait too long. Days passed, and the reunion wore on. Eleanor noticed subtle changes in the family's behavior. Whispered conversations ending abruptly when she entered the room, furtive glances exchanged across the table. One afternoon, she wandered into the old study, a room she had barely set foot in since childhood. Dusty books lined the shelves, and faded photographs hung crookedly on the walls. Jamie followed her, clutching a small wooden toy car. Eleanor's fingers brushed a leather-bound album on the desk. Opening it, she found letters and newspaper clippings. One letter caught her eye, written in her mother's shaky handwriting. It spoke of a secret pact made decades ago, something buried deep beneath the family's polished surface. Suddenly, the study door creaked. Eleanor froze as Frederick appeared in the doorway. You shouldn't be looking at those, he said sharply, his voice low. I'm just trying to understand, Eleanor replied steadily. Frederick's expression softened for a moment, then hardened again. Some things are better left alone. That night, Eleanor sat by the fire, the letter heavy in her hands. Jamie drew quietly nearby, sensing her tension. Do you think family means just what's written in those papers? Eleanor asked softly. Jamie shrugged. Maybe family is what you make it. Eleanor smiled, heart warmed by his words. But the shadows in the house were growing longer. The days grew colder as autumn crept through the village of Maplewood. Eleanor found herself walking the narrow lanes alone, the crunch of fallen leaves beneath her boots the only sound breaking the silence. The reunion had settled into a tense routine. Behind polite smiles, old grudges simmered like embers ready to ignite. Eleanor's presence was a constant reminder of wounds never fully healed. One evening, as the family gathered in the drawing room, Marianne took the floor with an air of authority. It's time we address the past, she announced, eyes sweeping the room. Secrets can no longer be ignored. Whispers rippled like a wave. Eleanor felt Jamie's small hand tighten around hers. Frederick cleared his throat. If we're to speak openly, we must remember why we're here, family. Eleanor's gaze flicked to Marianne. And what if family means more than just blood ties? Marianne's lips pressed into a thin line. It means loyalty. Loyalty can be demanded or earned, Eleanor said softly. Suddenly, the door creaked open. A figure stepped in. Robert, Eleanor's estranged uncle, long thought to have left the country. His eyes held a mix of regret and determination. I've come back to set things right, he said quietly. The room fell silent. Later that night, Eleanor and Robert sat by the fire. There are things you don't know, Robert confessed. About your mother, about the pact, about why I left. Eleanor leaned forward, heart pounding. Tell me everything. Outside, the wind howled, as if urging secrets to be revealed. Robert's voice was low, almost a whisper, as he began to reveal the secrets buried deep within the Bennett family. Your mother, Eleanor, was caught in the middle of a bitter dispute between her father and his siblings, he said. The pact was made to protect the family name, but it came at a cost. Eleanor listened intently, her fingers tightening around the armchair. They agreed to keep certain truths hidden, about money, about betrayals, and about a child no one was supposed to know existed. Jamie looked up from his drawing, sensing the weight of Robert's words. That child was your mother's half-brother, Robert continued. He disappeared when he was very young. Officially, the family says he died. Eleanor's heart pounded. But he didn't? No. He was hidden away, protected by some family members who disagreed with the pact. Marianne had entered quietly and now stood at the door, her face pale. You shouldn't be telling her this, she said sharply. Robert turned to face her. The truth needs to come out. It's the only way to heal. The room fell into a heavy silence. Later, Eleanor and Jamie sat by the window, watching the rain fall softly on the garden. Do you think the past can really change? Eleanor asked. Jamie shrugged. Maybe if we face it together. Eleanor smiled, hope flickering in her chest. But the family's secrets were far from over. Tensions in the Bennett household reached their peak the next day. Breakfast was a quiet affair, each family member lost in thought. Eleanor could feel the weight of unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. Suddenly, Marianne stood up, her voice sharp and commanding. This family has been living a lie for too long, she declared. We cannot ignore the past and pretend everything is fine. Frederick nodded slowly. She's right. But tearing each other apart won't fix what's broken. Eleanor looked at her cousins, some avoiding eye contact, others nodding reluctantly. Jamie tugged at her sleeve, whispering, "Mom, what will happen now?" Before Eleanor could answer, a loud crash came from the hallway. Everyone turned to see Robert standing beside a shattered vase, his face pale. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I didn't mean to cause more pain." Marianne's eyes flashed. Maybe some pain is necessary. Eleanor took a deep breath, steadying herself. This family needs honesty, even if it hurts. Suddenly, Jamie's voice rang out clear across the room. Sometimes, the truth is the only way to be free. The room fell silent. All eyes were on the 7-year-old boy who had become the unexpected voice of courage. Eleanor smiled, her heart swelling with pride and hope. The atmosphere in the Bennett house had shifted, the fragile calm replaced by a charged energy that no one could ignore. Eleanor found herself standing beside Robert in the library, a room filled with dusty books and faded photographs. "Tell me everything about the pact," she urged, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. Robert nodded and opened an old leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. The pact was a promise made generations ago to protect the family's reputation. Secrets were buried deep, affairs, betrayals, and a child hidden from public eyes. Eleanor's heart ached. Why keep such a secret? To prevent scandal, Robert replied. But in doing so, they sacrificed the truth and people. Outside, Jamie played quietly in the garden, unaware of the weight his family carried. Marianne approached Eleanor, her expression softer than before. "Maybe it's time to stop hiding," she said. Eleanor glanced at her son. "For Jamie, I want the truth to be our legacy." The night deepened as shadows lengthened. The past was no longer a burden to carry in silence. It was a story that needed to be told. The morning sun filtered through the curtains, casting a warm glow over the Bennett estate. Eleanor stood by the window, watching Jamie play with newfound joy in the garden. The family had gathered once more in the drawing room, the air lighter than before. Conversations were cautious but honest, each person slowly bridging the gap years of silence had created. Robert cleared his throat. "It's time to face the future together." Marianne nodded. "We can't change the past, but we can choose how we move forward." Eleanor smiled, her heart steady. "For Jamie, and for all of us, this is a new beginning." Jamie looked up at his mother and spoke clearly. "Family is not about secrets, it's about being there for each other." A gentle applause broke out, not just for Jamie's words, but for the hope they inspired. Eleanor knew the road ahead would be challenging, but with truth and love as their guide, the Bennetts could finally heal. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the garden fresh and full of promise. The past had been faced. The future was theirs to write.